The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho. There is a moment, often late at night or perhaps in the quiet drift of the early morning, when the noise of the world fades away. In that silence, a question tends to rise, unbidden and persistent. It asks, am I living the life I was meant to live? Or am I merely living the life that was expected of me? We all have dreams. We all have what the pages ahead will call a personal legend. It is that spark we carry as children, the absolute certainty that we are meant to be an astronaut, a writer, an explorer, or simply someone who changes the world. But as we age, the dust of routine settles. We are told that dreams are for sleepers, and that reality is for the waking. We learn to compromise. We learn to fear failure more than we desire fulfillment. And slowly, that voice inside us becomes a whisper. And then, eventually, silence. But you are here, listening to this, because that voice is not yet silent. You are here because there is something in you that still looks at the horizon and wonders what lies beyond it. You are about to embark on a story that is less of a novel and more of a mirror. On the surface, it appears to be a simple fable about a young shepherd named Santiago. He is a boy who loves his flock, who enjoys the simple rhythm of the Andalusian fields, and who seems content with a life of wandering the hills of Spain. But Santiago is haunted by a recurring dream, a dream of a treasure hidden thousands of miles away, at the base of the Egyptian pyramids. To find it, he must leave behind everything he knows. He must sell his sheep. He must cross a vast and unforgiving desert. He must trust in strangers. And more terrifyingly, he must learn to trust himself. As you walk this path with Santiago, you will realize that his journey is not unique. It is the journey of every human being who has ever dared to ask, what if? It is a story about the paralyzing grip of fear and the liberating power of faith. It is about the soul of the world, the idea that the universe is not indifferent to us, but rather, that it conspires to help us achieve our destiny. If only we have the courage to listen to the omens it places in our path. But before we step into the sands of the desert, we must understand the man who mapped this journey for us. Paulo Coelho was not always the literary giant we know today. In fact, for a long time, his own personal legend seemed impossible to reach. Born in Brazil in 1947, Coelho was a rebellious soul in a world that demanded conformity. He wanted to be an artist, a writer, a creator. His parents, believing they were acting out of love and concern for his future, mistook his passion for madness. 3 times, they had him committed to a mental institution. They wanted him to be an engineer, a lawyer, something safe, something solid. But the fire in Coelho could not be extinguished by walls or medication. He lived a life of extreme highs and lows. He was a hippie, a lyricist, a traveler, and a seeker. He walked the ancient road to Santiago de Compostela, a pilgrimage that broke him open and allowed the words to finally pour out. When he sat down to write The Alchemist in 1987, the words came in a torrent. He claims to have written the book in just 2 weeks because, as he said, the story was already written in his soul. However, the universe had one more test for him. When the book was first published, it was not a success. It sold only a handful of copies. The original publisher gave the rights back to him, telling him that he could make more money on the stock exchange. It was a failure. At that moment, Coelho stood exactly where the shepherd boy Santiago stands many times in this story, on the brink of giving up, staring at the evidence that his dream was foolish. But he did not stop. He believed in the message of his own book. He went door to door, publisher to publisher, fighting for this story. Slowly, without massive marketing campaigns or media frenzies, the book began to move. One reader gave it to a friend. That friend gave it to a mother. That mother gave it to a son. It spread by the most powerful medium of all, the human heart. Today, The Alchemist is one of the most translated books in history. It has sold tens of millions of copies worldwide. It has been read by presidents and plumbers, by rock stars and refugees. It has transcended language, culture, and religion. Why? Because it speaks the universal language. This book is often categorized as self-help, or philosophy, or fiction. But as you listen, you will find it defies these labels. It is an alchemy of words. Just as the alchemists of old sought to turn base metals into gold, this story seeks to turn our heavy leaden fears into the gold of spiritual clarity. As you listen to the narration ahead, do not just follow the plot. Listen to the spaces between the words. Pay attention to how you feel when the boy encounters a setback. Notice your own reaction when he meets the Englishman, the crystal merchant, and the alchemist himself. You may find that the book reads you just as much as you read it. You will learn about the concept of maktub, it is written. You will explore the idea that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. and you will be challenged to consider that perhaps the treasure you seek is not a chest of gold coins, but the person you become along the way to finding it. This is a story for those who have lost their way, and for those who are just beginning their journey. It is for the dreamers who are awake, and the realists who are secretly dreaming. So, take a deep breath. Let go of the skepticism that the world has layered upon you. Imagine the warm wind of the Levant blowing across your face. Imagine the smell of tea and the silence of the desert stars. The shepherd is gathering his sheep. The sun is rising over the Andalusian hills. The journey is about to begin. Listen to your heart. It knows things your mind cannot explain. Let us begin. If you are ready to discover your own personal legend, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to join us for the chapters ahead. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Chapter 1. The Shepherd's Life. The boy slept lightly. As shepherds often do, with one ear turned toward the night and the other toward the quiet breathing of his sheep. Above him, the sky was open and vast, stitched with stars that seemed close enough to touch. The stone walls around him were broken and worn by time, but they offered shelter from the wind, and that was enough. He woke before dawn, not because of sound, but because his body knew the hour. There was a certain moment in the night when darkness softened, when the cold began to loosen its grip. He opened his eyes and looked upward, watching the stars fade one by one through the broken roof. For a moment, he wished he could sleep longer. He felt as though he had been pulled out of something unfinished, something just beyond his reach. He sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the sheep too suddenly. They trusted him. That trust had grown quietly over years of shared roads and shared silences. As he stood, they stirred, sensing movement before seeing it, as if his waking had tugged gently at their own. He smiled to himself. It amused him that their lives were so closely tied to his. Or perhaps it was the other way around. Perhaps he had learned their rhythms so well that he mistook habit for control. He moved among them, tapping a shoulder here, calling softly there, speaking names only he remembered. He spoke to them, as he always did, not because he expected answers, but because the words felt right when spoken aloud. Sometimes he read to them from his books, not for their sake, but for his own. Words settled differently in the open air. They seemed to linger longer, as if the land itself were listening. This was the life he had chosen. Once, his world had been bounded by stone walls and strict hours. His parents had hoped for certainty for him, for a future that stayed in one place and carried respect. He had tried to want that life. He had learned to read ancient words, to memorize teachings meant to guide others. But even then, his eyes drifted toward maps. His mind wandered beyond the village roads, beyond the hills that marked the edge of familiarity. Books had taught him that the world was wide. Becoming a shepherd allowed him to step into those pages. Now, his possessions were few: a jacket worn thin at the elbows, a book he could trade when finished, a bottle for wine, and the flock that moved like a living thought across the land. Yet he felt rich in a way that could not be counted. Each morning brought a different sky. Each road held the promise of something unseen. As the sun lifted itself from the horizon, the land warmed slowly. Light spilled across the fields, touching the backs of the sheep, turning dust into gold. He began walking, staff in hand, guiding them not with force but with familiarity. They followed because they always had. He liked this hour best. Before the heat pressed down, before voices filled the air, when the world belonged only to those awake early enough to greet it. As they walked, his thoughts drifted, as they often did. He thought of the villages he had passed through, of faces that blurred together and names already forgotten. He thought of one face that was not forgotten, a memory that returned without effort. He told himself it did not matter. There were many villages, many roads, many faces. Yet the thought lingered longer than he expected. The sheep cared only for grass and water. They did not wonder what lay beyond the hills. They did not question the road beneath their hooves. He sometimes envied them for that simplicity, and sometimes it frightened him. He knew he could lead them anywhere, and they would follow. That knowledge unsettled him more than danger ever had. Trust, he realized, carried its own weight. When the sun climbed higher, he stopped near a patch of shade. He sat against a stone, pulled his book from his bag, and opened it. Reading, for him, was no longer an escape. It was a conversation. He compared the words on the page with the life unfolding around him, testing one against the other. Often, life taught him more. He paused mid-sentence and looked up. The land stretched outward, quiet and patient. He felt a familiar contentment settle over him, like a well-worn cloak. And yet there it was again. That faint sense of incompleteness, not dissatisfaction, not unhappiness, just a subtle pull, like a breeze felt but not seen. He had learned to live with it. When the heat grew heavy, he gathered his jacket and rested. The weight of it reminded him that comfort often came from things that first seemed burdensome. He had learned that lesson on the road, where cold mornings and scorching afternoons taught him respect for preparation. His thoughts returned to his father, to the day the decision had been spoken aloud. The memory was clear. There had been no anger, only a quiet resignation and a gift given without ceremony. Coins meant for inheritance, offered instead as permission, a blessing disguised as practicality. He understood now what he had not then. That his father's advice had carried more than words, it had carried a longing left unfulfilled. The afternoon passed slowly. When the shadows lengthened, he rose again, leading the flock onward. He chose a path he had not taken before, not because he expected anything new, but because choosing was part of being alive. The world, he had learned, revealed itself to those willing to change direction. As evening approached, he found shelter among old stones and low walls. He guided the sheep inside, securing the entrance as he always did. Routine was not the enemy of freedom, it was its foundation. He ate sparingly, drank from his bottle, and lay back, using his book as a pillow. Above him, the sky darkened, stars emerging one by one, patient and eternal. Chapter 2. The dream and the king's sleep returned slowly, like a tide that does not rush the shore, and when it did, it carried the boy once more into the same place he had visited before. He stood in an open field, the grass warm beneath his feet, his sheep scattered peacefully around him. The air felt different, here lighter, almost expectant. A child appeared among the flock, laughing softly, moving without fear. The sheep did not scatter. They welcomed the child as though they had always known him. The boy watched, uneasy but curious. Children, he had learned, possessed a strange authority over animals, as if innocence itself were a language the world understood. The child reached for his hand, and the world shifted. The field vanished. Distance folded in on itself. In a breath that felt both instant and endless, the boy found himself standing before towering stone shapes rising from the earth, ancient, immense, silent. They stood against the sky like thoughts carved into time itself. The child spoke, pointing toward the ground. "If you come here, you will find a treasure." The words settled into the boy's chest with a weight he could not explain. He leaned forward, desperate to understand, desperate to see more, and woke. Dawn had not yet broken. The air was still cool, and the stars were reluctant to fade. He sat up abruptly, heart pounding, hands gripping the fabric of his jacket. Again, the same dream, the same ending. Always waking before understanding. He ran a hand through his hair and laughed quietly, though there was no humor in it. Dreams, he told himself, were nothing more than fragments of memory and desire. Yet this one returned with a persistence that demanded attention. The sheep stirred as he moved. Their presence grounded him. He stood, began the familiar work of the morning, but his mind lagged behind his body. When the sun rose, he led the flock toward a nearby town. He told himself the visit was practical supplies, rest, a chance to trade his book for another. But beneath that reasoning was a quieter intention. In this town lived a woman known for interpreting dreams. He did not fully believe in such things. But shepherds learned early that survival depended on listening to the weather, to the land, to instincts that could not be explained. Ignoring signs, whether real or imagined, often came at a cost. The woman's house was small and dim, separated from the street by hanging beads that clinked softly as he passed through. The air smelled of herbs and old wood. She took his hands without ceremony, her grip firm, her eyes sharp. When he told her the dream, her expression changed. She did not embellish it. She did not soften it. Her interpretation was simple, almost blunt. The dream, she said, meant exactly what it showed. There was a treasure. It lay far away, and the dream would not stop returning until he chose whether to follow it. Her words unsettled him more than mystery ever could. He left with mixed feelings, relief that nothing supernatural had been demanded of him, irritation that the answer felt too easy, and a strange discomfort at the idea that the dream required action. By midday, the sun pressed heavily against the town square. He sat on a bench, eating slowly, letting the noise of the place wash over him. Movement calmed his thoughts. People passed carrying goods, stories, worries. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. He opened his book, but the words refused to settle. His thoughts returned again and again to the dream, to the child's voice, to the certainty in it. That was when the old man sat beside him. At first, the boy barely noticed. Travelers came and went. Conversation was common, but there was something deliberate in the way the man settled, as if he had chosen this exact moment, this exact place. They spoke of small things at first, wine, the heat, books. The man's voice was calm, unhurried, as though time bent slightly around him. Then he asked a question that made the boy pause. "What is it that you most want from life?" The boy hesitated, not because he did not know the answer, but because no one had ever asked him so plainly. Before he could reply, the old man spoke again, describing the dream accurately, precisely without having been told. The boy felt the world tilt. The man smiled gently, not with pride, but with recognition. He spoke of a calling that lives quietly inside every person, a purpose not assigned by others, but remembered. He said that when people are young, this calling speaks clearly. Over time, fear and habit muffle its voice. The boy listened, unable to interrupt. Something in the man's words felt less like teaching and more like remembering something the boy had always known. He spoke of a great lie that life eventually strips people of choice, that dreams must yield to circumstance. He said the lie was powerful because it sounded reasonable. The boy thought of his own life. He had chosen the road. He had chosen movement, yet even he had settled into patterns that felt permanent. The man introduced himself simply, without titles that explained anything. He said he was a king not of lands measured by borders, but of something older. The boy did not know whether to laugh or believe him. But belief, he realized, was not required for listening. Before leaving, the man offered guidance, not directions, but conditions. He said that the boy would be tested, that the world would speak to him through chance meetings and quiet signs, that help would come, but only if the boy proved willing to act. Then he asked for a small payment, not money, something living. The request startled the boy, yet as he looked at his flock waiting patiently beyond the square, he understood. Possession, he realized, was not about quantity, but attachment. He agreed. The old man accepted without ceremony. He showed the boy how to listen, not with ears alone, but with attention. He explained that the world was alive with meaning, but meaning revealed itself only to those who moved toward it. When the man stood to leave, the square seemed suddenly ordinary again. Noise returned. The moment passed. The boy sat alone, stunned, holding something he could not yet name. By evening, he returned to the fields. The sheep moved as they always had, unaware that anything had changed. Yet everything had. As the sun dipped low, the boy stopped walking. He looked ahead, not at the road beneath his feet, but at the horizon beyond it. For the first time, the dream did not feel like an interruption. It felt like an invitation. That night, as he lay beneath the stars, sleep came easily. And though no dream returned, he sensed that something within him had already begun to move quietly, steadily toward a place he had not yet learned to imagine. Chapter 3, Crossing into the Unknown. Morning came without hesitation. The boy woke before the sun, stirred not by sound, but by a quiet certainty settling into his chest. The fields were still wrapped in shadow, the air cool and motionless. His sheep slept nearby, their breathing steady, unaware that this morning was unlike the others. For a long moment, he remained lying there, staring at the sky as it slowly lightened. He felt calm, as though a decision had already been made somewhere deep inside him, without the need for argument. He rose and moved among the flock, touching familiar wool, hearing familiar sounds. Each sheep looked the same as it always had. Each step of the morning routine unfolded just as before. And yet, everything felt different. When the sun finally broke free of the horizon, he turned toward the town. He told himself there were practical matters to attend to, loose ends to gather. But beneath that reasoning was a deeper truth he did not yet speak aloud. He was walking toward a boundary not marked by walls or signs, but by choice. The town greeted him with noise and movement. Merchants called out prices. Travelers moved quickly, eyes fixed ahead. Boats rested at the edge of the water, rocking gently as though impatient. He stopped and watched them. Until now, the world had always opened itself gradually, one village at a time, one road leading naturally to the next. But this was different. This required leaving behind the land he knew, not just physically, but inwardly. The sheep waited outside the town, calm and trusting. He stood between them and the water, feeling the weight of the moment settle fully at last. He thought of all the days that had led him here, of choosing the shepherd's life for its freedom, not knowing that freedom would someday ask something in return, of believing that movement alone was enough, that wandering itself fulfilled the hunger he carried. He realized now that wandering had only prepared him. He returned to the flock and began the work he had avoided thinking about. The exchange was quiet, almost solemn. What he gave away was more than animals. It was certainty. Familiar weight, a version of himself that knew exactly who he was when he woke each morning. When it was done, he stood alone. The road behind him felt suddenly distant. The sheep were gone. The fields no longer waited for him. For the first time since he had become a shepherd, he did not know where he would sleep that night. The feeling was unsettling and alive. He walked toward the water, heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the movement of the boats. The smell of salt and wood filled the air. Voices blended into a language he did not fully understand, but that no longer frightened him. Fear, he realized, changed shape when faced directly. He boarded the vessel with nothing more than his jacket, his money, and a resolve that felt fragile but real. As the boat pulled away from shore, the town began to shrink behind him. Buildings blurred into shapes. Sounds softened. The land he knew receded quietly, without protest. He stood at the edge of the deck, gripping the rail, watching the water stretch endlessly ahead. There was no path here, no markers, just movement and trust. As the shore vanished completely, a strange thought surfaced. There was no turning back now, not because he could not return, but because returning would no longer mean the same thing. Time passed differently on the water. The sun climbed, burned, and began its descent. The boy sat among strangers, listening more than speaking, absorbing the unfamiliar rhythms of voices and gestures. He felt small, but not insignificant. Then the boat stopped. The world he stepped into was louder, sharper, harsher. The air felt heavier. The ground beneath his feet seemed less forgiving. He realized immediately that this land followed different rules. He took a few steps forward, and the crowd closed in. At first he did not understand what was happening. Movement surrounded him. Hands brushed past. Words were spoken too quickly, too close. Then he felt the absence. His heart dropped before his mind could catch up. He searched his pockets once, twice. Panic rose fast and hot. The world tilted violently as realization struck. Everything he had left with was gone. For a moment, he could not breathe. He stood frozen amid the noise, the colors, the unfamiliar language pressing in from all sides. His chest tightened with a fear deeper than hunger or exhaustion. This fear whispered a single thought, over and over. You have made a mistake. The sun burned overhead, indifferent. People passed without noticing him. Life continued without pause. He sank down near a wall, his back pressed against stone, staring at the ground. The enormity of what had happened settled slowly, like dust after collapse. He had crossed into the unknown, and the unknown had taken everything. Anger followed quickly. Anger at himself, at the dream, at the old man's words that had sounded so certain. He felt foolish for having believed that the world would respond kindly to courage. He thought of the fields, of the sheep, of mornings that had once felt simple. The thought hurt more than the loss itself. Hours passed. The sun lowered. Hunger gnawed quietly at the edges of his awareness. And beneath it all, a deeper ache took hold not of the body, but of direction. He could sit here and let the world move around him, or he could stand. The choice felt smaller than the one he had made before, yet somehow heavier. Slowly, he rose. His legs trembled, but they held. He looked around, not searching for what was lost, but for what remained. His hands were empty, his future uncertain, but he was still alive. And something else, quieter but stronger, stirred beneath the fear. He had crossed into the unknown. That much was undeniable, and though the unknown had stripped him bare, it had not turned him away. As night began to fall, the boy took his first steps forward into this new land, not knowing where they would lead. Only that standing still was no longer an option. Above him, unseen by the crowded streets, the stars waited as they always had, and somewhere within him, a fragile understanding took root. Crossing into the unknown was not the end of the journey. It was the moment the journey truly began. Chapter 4. Learning through loss. The night did not offer comfort. The boy slept in brief, restless fragments, waking often to unfamiliar sounds, the murmur of voices he could not understand, footsteps passing too close, laughter that carried no meaning for him. The ground beneath him was hard, the air thick with scents he could not name. When morning finally arrived, it came without gentleness. He opened his eyes to a world that felt sharper than the one he had left behind. For a moment, he lay still, hoping the heaviness in his chest would lift. It did not. Memory returned quickly, too quickly. The crossing, the crowd, the sudden emptiness in his pockets. Loss, he realized, did not announce itself loudly. It settled quietly, fully, leaving no room for denial. He sat up and pressed his back against the wall. Hunger was already present, but it was not the most painful thing he felt. That honor belonged to doubt. Doubt moved through him like a slow shadow, touching every thought. Had the dream been nothing more than imagination? Had the old man spoken truths meant for someone else? The questions repeated themselves without answers. He stood and began to walk, not with direction, but with necessity. Movement, he had learned, kept despair from taking root. As long as his feet moved, the world still responded. The city unfolded around him, markets crowded with color, voices layered in unfamiliar rhythms. The clang of metal, the smell of food that made his hunger sharper. He watched from the edges, careful, invisible. He noticed how people worked without pause. They lifted, carried, argued, bargained. Life here did not slow to acknowledge loss. It demanded participation. By midday, the sun pressed down mercilessly. His strength waned. He leaned against a wall and closed his eyes, letting frustration rise fully at last. Everything had been taken, or so it seemed. As he stood there, a small realization surfaced, quiet but persistent. Though he had lost what he carried, he had not lost himself. His hands were still capable, his body still willing, his mind still awake. He thought of the sheep, of how they moved on after each pasture was exhausted, never clinging to what no longer fed them. Perhaps, he thought, loss was not punishment. Perhaps it was instruction. The thought did not comfort him immediately, but it stayed. Nearby, a shopkeeper struggled with his wares. Glass caught the sunlight, fragile and bright. The boy watched as a piece slipped, shattered against the ground. No one stopped. The shopkeeper sighed, bent, and continued working. The boy stepped forward. He did not know the language well, but need speaks clearly without words. He offered help with his hands, with gestures. The shopkeeper studied him for a long moment, weighing risk against usefulness. Finally, he nodded. The work was simple at first: cleaning, arranging, carrying. The boy worked carefully, attentively. He learned quickly that effort translated across cultures. That willingness softened suspicion. As hours passed, the rhythm of work steadied his thoughts. His hunger remained, but it no longer ruled him. Purpose, even small, created its own nourishment. The shopkeeper watched him closely, not unkindly, not warmly either, simply observant. At the end of the day, he offered food and a place to rest, not as charity, but as exchange. The boy accepted with gratitude that surprised even himself. That night, exhaustion claimed him quickly. Sleep came without dreams. Days followed in similar fashion. He learned the patterns of the shop. The fragility of glass taught him patience. Carelessness carried immediate consequence. Attention was rewarded. He listened more than he spoke. He learned words slowly, meanings faster. He noticed how the shopkeeper approached work not with joy, but with resignation. There was a sadness there, buried deep beneath routine. One evening, as they closed the shop, the boy found himself asking a question without planning it. Why do you do this work, if it does not make you happy? The shopkeeper paused. His answer came slowly. Because once, I dreamed of something else. And dreaming made the loss harder. The words stayed with the boy long after the shop lights dimmed. He understood then that loss took many forms. Some were sudden and visible. Others stretched quietly across years, shaping lives so gradually they became invisible. Weeks passed. The boy changed in ways he did not immediately recognize. His movements became more deliberate, his gaze steadier. He learned to find opportunity in routine, improvement in repetition. One day, he noticed something simple. Customers lingered when the shop felt inviting. Cleanliness mattered, order mattered, even beauty mattered. He suggested small changes. The shopkeeper resisted at first. Habit clings tightly. But slowly, results spoke louder than doubt. Business improved. With it, something else shifted. The shopkeeper's posture straightened. His voice gained strength. The shop became not just a place of work, but of interaction. The boy realized that loss had taught him something no comfort ever had. That nothing is wasted. Not pain, not effort, not even mistakes. Each loss stripped away what was unnecessary, revealing what could still be built. One evening, counting earnings, the boy felt a familiar stirring, a quiet pull. He had learned much here, gained stability, even respect. But the feeling returned, just as it had in the fields long ago. This place was not the destination, it was preparation. He stood outside the shop that night, looking up at a sky both familiar and foreign. The stars were the same, their silence unchanged. He thought of the dream not as promise, but as question. Loss had brought him here, learning had kept him alive, but growth, he now understood, required movement once more. He was no longer afraid of losing what he had gained, because he had learned something far more valuable. That when life takes something away, it is not always asking for surrender. Sometimes, it is asking for trust. As he turned back inside, the boy felt steady not because he knew what came next, but because he now trusted himself to learn whatever the road demanded. Loss had been his teacher, and the lesson, though difficult, had finally taken root. Chapter 5: The Caravan and the Desert. The decision was not sudden. It arrived quietly. the way true decisions often do, without drama, without urgency, simply settling into place as if it had been waiting all along. The boy felt it one morning as he opened the shop, sunlight catching the edges of the glass and scattering small rainbows across the walls. He paused, hands still, and knew that his time here was drawing to a close. He had learned what he needed. The city had given him shelter when he had nothing, work when he was lost, and lessons that could not be taught gently. Loss had sharpened him, responsibility had steadied him, and now comfort earned and real tested him in a new way. Staying would be easy. The shopkeeper sensed the change before it was spoken. He had learned to read silences better than words. When the boy finally told him of his wish to continue onward, the man did not argue. He only nodded, slowly, as though acknowledging something he had once known himself. They spoke little that day. When the boy left, he carried more than money and provisions. He carried confidence earned through effort, and the understanding that work, done with attention, transforms both the task and the one who performs it. Beyond the city walls, the world opened once more. The desert waited. He joined a caravan traveling east, its camels lined patiently beneath the sky. The people were varied traders, guides, seekers, each carrying reasons they did not readily share. Conversation was sparse. The desert, he learned quickly, encouraged silence. As the caravan began to move, the boy felt a familiar sensation return, that gentle tension between fear and excitement. The awareness that each step forward closed certain doors forever. The land changed gradually at first. Color drained from the earth. Vegetation thinned, then vanished. What remained was space, vast, uncompromising, and honest. Days settled into rhythm. Walk, rest, eat, watch the horizon. At night, the cold crept in, sharp and uninvited. By day, the sun ruled without mercy. The desert did not negotiate. He learned to observe the caravan leader, a man whose movements were calm, economical. Nothing was wasted, not words, not effort. When danger was discussed, it was done plainly, without fear or false reassurance. The boy listened. He noticed how the desert changed people. Some grew quiet and inward. Others spoke too much, as if sound might protect them from emptiness. The boy chose stillness. The desert, he sensed, spoke most clearly to those who did not interrupt it. At night, beneath stars brighter than any he had known, he lay awake and listened to the wind shaping the dunes, to the breathing of camels, to his own thoughts settling into unfamiliar patterns. He thought of the fields he had crossed long ago, of sheep that trusted without question, of roads that curved gently, forgiving hesitation. The desert was different. Here, hesitation carried consequence. One evening, as the caravan made camp, talk turned to conflict. Distant rumors of war traveled faster than people themselves. The guides listened carefully, weighing information like grain testing its weight, its truth. The boy felt unease stir within him. Not fear exactly, awareness. He realized then that the desert was not empty. It was full of forces older than villages, stronger than plans. To cross it safely required something beyond strength. It required alignment. As days passed, he felt himself changing again. His thoughts grew clearer. Distractions fell away. The past loosened its grip. The future narrowed into the next step, the next breath. The desert stripped life down to essentials: water, direction, trust. One afternoon, walking beside a man who watched the horizon constantly, the boy asked how he knew where to go when everything looked the same. The man smiled faintly. "The desert is never the same," he said. "Only those who do not look carefully believe that." The boy took that lesson to heart. He began to notice subtle signs: the firmness of sand, the way wind marked the dunes, the behavior of birds in the distance. The desert, he realized, spoke a language of patterns. Once learned, it could be read. And so could life. One night, as the caravan rested, the boy felt the pull again. That quiet stirring deep within. Now stronger, clearer, it no longer felt like a dream calling from afar. It felt like a presence walking beside him. He closed his eyes and listened, not to memory, not to fear, but to the steady rhythm that had guided him since the beginning. He understood something then. The journey was no longer about reaching a place. It was about becoming someone capable of arriving. The desert did not offer comfort, but it offered truth. It reflected back whatever was brought into it: patience or panic, humility or arrogance. Those who fought it were exhausted. Those who listened were taught. As the caravan moved on beneath the rising sun, the boy felt grounded in a way he never had before. He no longer needed constant reassurance. Uncertainty had become familiar, and familiarity, he knew, bred confidence. Ahead, the horizon shimmered endless, inviting, unforgiving. He did not know what awaited him beyond it. But he knew this. He was no longer crossing the desert to escape something behind him. He was crossing it to meet something within. The caravan moved forward, steady and deliberate, carrying lives and intentions across the vast silence. And as the desert unfolded before him, the boy felt neither small nor lost. He felt present. And in that presence, the desert began not as an obstacle but as a companion on the road still unfolding. Chapter 6, Love and Destiny. The oasis appeared gradually. Like a promise, the land took its time to keep. After days of sand and silence, the first signs were subtle: a shift in the air, a softness carried on the wind. Then green emerged where none should exist. Palm trees stood against the sky, their shadows long and generous. Water reflected light instead of swallowing it. The caravan slowed. Here, movement paused, not from fear, but from reverence. The desert allowed rest only in places that mattered. The boy felt the change immediately. His body relaxed in ways he had forgotten were possible. His thoughts loosened their grip on survival and widened again, making room for wonder. Life gathered here. People moved between tents and trees. Children ran freely. Animals drank without hurry. Voices carried laughter instead of caution. The oasis breathed differently than the desert, as if reminding travelers of what softness felt like. And it was here without warning, without preparation, that he saw her. She stood near the well, framed by light and movement, her presence both simple and unmistakable. She was not adorned by excess. She did not seek attention. Yet the world seemed to gather quietly around her. Their eyes met. The moment did not rush. It settled. He felt no confusion, no urgency, only recognition. As if something within him had been gently aligned, like a compass finding true north. He approached slowly, aware that haste would break whatever delicate balance had formed. When they spoke, words felt unnecessary, yet welcome. Conversation flowed not from effort, but from ease. They spoke of small things: water, travel, the day's heat. But beneath every word moved a deeper current. He learned her name, and in doing so, felt something within himself shift quietly, irrevocably. They met again the next day. And the next. Time at the oasis unfolded differently. Days stretched, then folded into evenings filled with conversation and shared silence. He spoke of the road, of learning through loss, of listening to the world. She listened not as one who waits to reply, but as one who understands. She spoke of the desert as if it were alive, not cruel, not kind, simply honest. She spoke of love as something that did not bind, but allowed. The boy felt something unfamiliar take root, not possession, not fear, but stillness. For the first time since leaving the fields, the journey paused not because he was tired, but because his heart had found rest. And with rest came a new question. Could love be a destination? The thought unsettled him. One evening, as the sky darkened and stars revealed themselves, he spoke the question aloud. He told her of the dream, of the pull that had led him across water and desert, of the sense that something awaited him beyond the horizon. He waited, uncertain. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she smiled gently. Love, she said, does not ask you to choose between itself and your destiny. The words stayed with him. He wanted to believe them. Yet doubt crept in, quiet and persuasive. He had learned that staying was always easier than leaving. That comfort, once found, asked gently but insistently to be protected. He feared that moving forward would mean losing her. She seemed to sense his struggle. One afternoon, as they walked among the palms, she stopped and faced him. If you stay because of fear, she said, what you love will slowly turn into regret. He felt the truth of it, land without resistance. That night, sleep did not come easily. He lay awake, listening to the oasis water moving, leaves whispering, life continuing. He realized that love had changed him, not by anchoring him, but by revealing what mattered. Love had not replaced the journey. It had given it meaning. In the days that followed, he noticed something else. His awareness sharpened. Signs appeared more clearly. The world seemed to respond more readily, as if acknowledging his willingness to move without abandoning what he cherished. He understood then that love was not something to be clung to. It was something that walked beside you. On the morning the caravan prepared to depart, the oasis felt different, not diminished, not emptied, simply complete. He stood with her at the edge of movement, feeling both fullness and ache. They did not promise what could not be guaranteed. They did not pretend that distance would be painless. Instead, they shared something quieter: trust. As the caravan began to move, he looked back once. She stood among the palms, steady, unafraid, not waiting, believing. The desert opened before him, again vast, demanding, alive. But he did not feel alone. Love had not been left behind. It had settled into him, becoming part of the rhythm that guided his steps. He walked forward, knowing something essential had changed. Destiny, he realized, does not arrive in spite of love. It arrives because love teaches us how to walk toward it without fear. And as the horizon stretched endlessly ahead, the boy moved on, not divided between heart and purpose, but carried forward by both, at last aligned. Chapter 7. The Alchemist appears. The desert did not announce him. There was no sudden sound, no shift in the wind that demanded attention. The caravan moved as it always did, slowly, deliberately, when the boy felt a presence beside him, quiet yet unmistakable, as though the silence itself had taken shape. He looked up. The man rode a horse, the color of ash, his posture effortless, his gaze steady. He wore simple clothing, marked by the desert but not worn down by it. There was nothing extravagant about him, nothing that sought authority. And yet, authority followed him naturally, like a shadow that could not be separated from its source. The boy felt his breath catch, not in fear, but recognition. The man's eyes were calm, observant, as if they had seen many beginnings and were never surprised by one more. When he spoke, his voice was neither loud nor soft. It carried without effort. "What is it you are listening for?" The question startled the boy. He had not realized how attentively he had been listening to the wind, to the sand, to the quiet movements within himself. "I'm not sure," the boy answered honestly. The man nodded, as if this were the most reasonable response. "Good," he said. "Certainty comes later." They rode together for a while without speaking. The caravan continued ahead, unaware that anything extraordinary was unfolding at its edge. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, indifferent to the meeting, yet somehow shaped by it. The boy studied the man from the corner of his eye. There was a stillness about him that did not resist motion, a confidence that did not need explanation. "Who are you?" the boy finally asked. The man smiled faintly. "Someone who listens to the desert," he said, "and someone the desert listens to in return." The words stirred something deep within the boy. He thought of all he had learned since leaving the fields: how to observe, how to endure, how to trust signs without demanding proof. "You have come far," the man said, not in distance, but in understanding. The boy felt warmth rise in his chest, not pride, but humility. He realized he was being seen, not for what he carried, but for what he had become. They stopped near a low rise of stone. The man dismounted with fluid ease and gestured for the boy to do the same. Together, they stood facing the open land. "What do you believe the desert teaches?" the man asked. The boy thought carefully. "That what is essential cannot be carried," he said slowly. "Only learned." The man's eyes softened. "Then you are ready to learn more." The lesson did not come in words. The man asked the boy to sit. He asked him to close his eyes, to breathe not as one who struggles, but as one who belongs. The desert wind brushed against them, carrying grains of sand that felt neither harsh nor gentle, simply present. "Listen," the man said. At first, the boy heard only the obvious: the wind, the distant movement of camels, the quiet hum of life pressing forward. Then, gradually, something else emerged. A deeper rhythm, a steady pulse beneath sound. The desert was not silent. It was speaking, not in language, but in intention. The boy felt his thoughts slow, then settle. He felt boundaries soften between himself and the land, between question and answer. For a brief moment, he did not feel like a traveler crossing the desert. He felt like part of it. When he opened his eyes, the man was watching him closely. "Most people hear only the noise of their own fear," the man said. "You are beginning to hear beyond that." The boy swallowed, unsure how to respond. "Why are you here?" he asked. The man did not answer immediately. Instead, he picked up a small handful of sand, letting it fall slowly back to the ground. "Because there comes a point," he said, "when guidance must take a different form. Words are no longer enough. Examples must appear." The boy understood, then not fully, but enough. This man was not here to lead him by the hand. He was here to walk beside him until the boy could walk alone. The man mounted his horse once more. "We will meet again," he said, as if stating something already decided. "Until then, continue listening. The desert will test what you think you know." With that, he turned and rode away, not toward the caravan. Not away from it, but along a path that seemed to appear only because he followed it. The boy stood watching until the figure blended into heat and distance. Nothing around him had changed. And yet, everything had. He returned to the caravan with a quiet certainty settling into his bones. The journey ahead felt sharper now, clearer in its demands. He sensed that what awaited him would not be gentle, but it would be honest. That night, beneath a sky crowded with stars, the boy did not dream. He listened. and in the vast, living silence of the desert. He understood that the guide he had been waiting for had finally appeared, not to give answers, but to awaken the part of him capable of finding them. Chapter 8. Becoming one with the world. The desert grew quieter, not empty, never empty, but attentive, as though it had leaned closer to listen. The caravan moved more slowly now, each step measured, each pause deliberate. The boy felt it in his body before he understood it with his mind. Something had shifted, not around him, but within. He walked with a new awareness. Each breath seemed connected to the next. Each footstep felt placed rather than taken. The desert no longer appeared as something he crossed. It felt like something he entered again and again, with every moment of attention. At night, beneath the stars, he sat apart from the others and listened. The wind traced patterns along the dunes. The fire crackled and settled. Even silence had texture. He realized that when he stopped trying to name what he heard, understanding arrived on its own. He remembered the man on the ash-colored horse, to calm in his voice, the way he had asked him to listen without effort. The boy did not try to summon that presence again. He sensed that seeking it would only push it farther away. Instead, he learned to wait. Waiting, he discovered, was not the same as doing nothing. It was an active openness, a readiness without tension. As days passed, the desert began to teach him in ways words never could. It showed him how resistance created suffering, how alignment created flow. When he moved with impatience, the heat felt harsher. When he moved with humility, the land seemed to offer subtle assistance, shade at the right moment, wind at the right time. He noticed that the caravan animals sensed changes before humans did. He watched their ears, their posture, their quiet refusals. He learned to trust these signals without demanding explanation. Gradually, his sense of separation softened. There were moments, brief, fragile. He felt the boundary between himself and the world thin, when the desert's vastness no longer made him feel small, but connected. When his thoughts slowed enough for something deeper to surface, he realized that the world was not something to be understood from the outside. It was something to be entered. One afternoon, the caravan stopped abruptly. The guides spoke in low voices. Tension moved through the group like a ripple. The boy felt it too, but instead of fear, he felt clarity. He closed his eyes. The desert breathed. He did not ask questions. He listened. The wind carried a warning. The land held still, in a way that was not peaceful, but alert. Danger was near, not as threat, but as possibility. He spoke quietly to the guides, sharing what he sensed, not with certainty, but with calm. They listened not because he claimed authority, but because his presence carried no urgency. The caravan changed course. Later, when danger passed without incident, no one celebrated. There was no need. The desert did not reward, it responded. That night, the boy lay awake, looking at the stars. He thought of the life he had once known, of sheep and fields, of choices that felt large at the time. He saw now that each choice had led him here, not by force, but by coherence. He understood something essential then. The journey had never been about reaching a place. It had been about learning how to belong wherever he stood. He thought of love not as absence or longing, but as connection. He felt it now, not directed at a single person or dream, but extended outward, encompassing sand and sky, movement and stillness. He did not feel dissolved. He felt whole. In the days that followed, this understanding deepened. He stopped narrating his experience to himself, stopped measuring progress. He allowed moments to be complete on their own terms. When he walked, he walked. When he rested, he rested. When he listened fully. The desert responded by revealing itself more clearly. Colors sharpened. The play of light on sand became endlessly varied. Even hardship felt instructive rather than cruel. He saw now why so many feared the desert. It reflected exactly what one brought into it. Those who arrived with noise heard chaos. Those who arrived with fear found danger everywhere. Those who arrived with openness discovered order beneath the vastness. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the dunes with golden shadow, the boy felt a quiet certainty settle within him. He was no longer asking the world for permission. He was participating. He sensed that something important approached, not an event, but a readiness. A moment when action would be required, not from impulse, but from harmony. He was not rushing toward it. He trusted it would arrive when alignment was complete. As the caravan continued, the boy moved with it not as a passenger, not as a seeker, but as a presence fully awake within the unfolding world. And in that state, neither grasping nor resisting, he discovered something the desert had been offering all along. That to become one with the world is not to lose oneself. It is to finally stand where you have always belonged, aware, connected, and ready for whatever the next moment asks. The stars watched in silence. The sand shifted patiently, and the boy, now attuned to the rhythm beneath all things, walked forward, not alone, not separate but carried by the same quiet force that moved the desert, the sky, and the unseen path still waiting ahead. Chapter 9. The Final Trial. The desert changed its tone. It was subtle at first, an edge in the wind, a tension beneath the stillness. The boy sensed it long before anyone spoke of danger. The caravan moved cautiously now, conversations muted, eyes scanning the horizon more often than the ground beneath their feet. This was not fear, it was recognition. He felt it in his chest, steady and unmistakable. Something awaited him ahead, not as reward, but as reckoning. Everything he had learned, everything he had become, was being quietly gathered for use. The final trial does not announce itself. He realized it arrives when preparation is complete. The caravan stopped near a stretch of land where the dunes rose sharply, sculpted by relentless wind. The air felt heavy, charged. The guides spoke in low voices, weighing whether to continue or wait. The boy stood apart, listening not to the words, but to what lay beneath them. The desert was not hostile. It was asking a question. That night, he slept lightly. No dreams came. Instead, awareness remained, hovering just below wakefulness. He felt the pull again, not forward, not backward, but inward. At dawn, the sky burned pale and vast. The boy stepped away from the caravan, walking alone toward the rising dunes. He did not seek permission. He did not explain. Some journeys, he understood now, could not be witnessed. Each step felt deliberate. The sand resisted, then yielded. The wind pressed against him, testing balance and resolve. The sun climbed quickly, unforgiving, stripping comfort from every thought. Fatigue arrived first, then doubt. You have come far enough, the doubt whispered. Turn back, what more do you need to prove? He paused, breathing deeply. The voice was familiar. It had followed him since the beginning, changing shape but never leaving entirely. He did not argue with it. He listened beyond it. He placed his hand on the sand and felt its heat, its age, its patience. He closed his eyes and opened himself fully to fear, to exhaustion, to uncertainty. He did not resist any of it. And something shifted. The desert did not push back harder. It softened. The wind changed direction. Not dramatically, just enough. His breathing slowed, his thoughts quieted. He felt the boundary between effort and surrender dissolve. He understood then what the final trial demanded. Not strength, not courage, but trust, without condition. He stood and walked on, not forcing progress, not waiting for reassurance, simply moving in alignment with what was. Hours passed. Or moments. Time loosened its grip. At the crest of the dunes, the boy stopped. Before him stretched a vast openness, no landmark, no marker of success. Just endless desert meeting, endless sky. This was it. There would be no sign to declare completion. No voice to confirm victory. The trial was not about reaching something external. It was about remaining present when nothing responded. He felt the urge to search for meaning, for confirmation, for something to claim as proof. Instead, he let go. He stood still, fully exposed, fully attentive. The desert breathed, and in that breath, he felt himself breathe with it, not separately, not insignificantly, but as part of the same movement. Fear fell away, not dramatically, but completely. Desire loosened, expectation dissolved. What remained was a clarity so simple it felt almost ordinary. He was enough. The journey had not been a test imposed by the world. It had been an invitation to become real. When he turned back toward the caravan, his steps felt lighter, not because the sand had changed, but because resistance was gone. The sun still burned. The wind still moved. The desert was unchanged, but he was not. The caravan greeted him without question. They sensed the difference without needing to name it. Some truths announced themselves without words. That night, beneath the stars, the boy slept deeply for the first time in many days. No dreams came. None were needed. The final trial had not demanded that he conquer the desert. It had asked that he stop trying to conquer anything at all. As the caravan prepared to move again at dawn, the boy stood ready, not as a seeker chasing fulfillment, but as someone who had learned to stand fully within each moment. Whatever awaited him next, loss or arrival, silence or revelation, he would meet it without division, because the final trial had already given him its answer. And the answer was simple. To walk forward without fear, without illusion, and without needing the road to promise anything in return. Chapter 10. The Treasure Revealed. The return was quieter than the departure. The desert did not resist him now. It did not test or question. It simply opened, as it always had, allowing passage without commentary. The boy walked with steady steps, his breath even, his thoughts clear. There was no urgency left in him, no need to arrive quickly. What mattered had already been understood. When the familiar stones of the old ruin appeared on the horizon, he stopped. The place looked unchanged, weathered walls, collapsed roof, the wide sky above it. The same shelter that had once been nothing more than a resting place now stood before him like a mirror. He felt a faint smile rise, not of amusement, but recognition. So this is where it began, he thought. He entered slowly, brushing dust from the stone with his hand. The ground was dry and uneven. The air carried the faint scent of earth and time. He stood at the center of the ruin and felt a strange stillness settle around him. No voice spoke, no sign appeared. For a moment, doubt flickered, not sharp, not consuming, just enough to remind him that certainty never arrives without silence. He knelt and pressed his hands into the soil. And then he began to dig. The work was physical, honest, grounding. Each movement connected him to the earth beneath his knees, to the simple act of effort without expectation. Sweat formed quickly under the sun. His hands grew sore. Still, he continued. Minutes passed. Then longer. Nothing emerged. He paused, leaning back on his heels, chest rising and falling. A quiet laugh escaped him, not bitter, not disappointed, just real. Of course, he thought. The treasure was never meant to be taken easily. He dug again, and then his hand struck something solid. The sound was unmistakable. He froze, breath caught, heart suddenly loud in his ears. Carefully, he cleared the surrounding soil, revealing a worn wooden chest, bound with metal dulled by age. For a moment, he did not open it. He sat there, hands resting on the lid, feeling the weight of the journey settle fully into his body. The fields, the loss, the desert, the love, the silence, the trials that had stripped him down and built him back, piece by piece. He lifted the lid. Gold caught the sunlight, warm and steady. Coins, objects shaped by hands long gone. Proof of value recognized by the world. Yet, as he looked at it, he felt no rush, no hunger, no disbelief, only gratitude. He understood then that the treasure was not the reward for the journey. It was the reminder, a reminder that what we seek often lies closer than we imagine, but only reveals itself after we learn how to see. He closed the chest gently and sat back, eyes lifting to the sky above the broken roof. The same stars would appear tonight. The same silence would return. But he was no longer the boy who had first slept here. He had learned to listen, to lose, to trust, to love without holding back, to walk forward without demanding guarantees. The treasure beneath the earth reflected what had already been uncovered within him. He stood, brushing dust from his clothes, feeling the quiet certainty of someone who knows that the journey does not end with arrival. It simply changes form. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land, the boy looked once more at the horizon, not searching now, but acknowledging it. There would be more roads, more choices, more moments of doubt and wonder. But whatever came next, he knew this. The world would always respond to those who listen deeply enough to hear it. And with that understanding, simple, complete, and Arendai stepped forward, carrying the treasure not as possession, but as confirmation that the path he had followed had always been true. If this journey touched you, inspired you, or made you pause and reflect, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This audiobook was created with deep care and dedication, each chapter thoughtfully adapted, each scene carefully shaped, with the intention of preserving the soul of the story while making its wisdom accessible to everyone. Countless hours went into reading, understanding, rewriting, refining, and bringing this timeless message to life, not just as a story, but as an experience meant to stay with you beyond these final words. By liking and sharing, you help this wisdom reach others who may be standing at their own crossroads, waiting for a sign, a reminder, or a quiet moment of clarity. Thank you for walking this entire path. May the lessons stay with you, and may you always have the courage to follow your own journey. Until we meet again.